Welcome to season 13 of the Parenting Aces podcast, a proud member of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and this week, Coach J.Y. Aubone rejoins us to discuss a topic that is continually being discussed amongst tennis parents and coaches everywhere, and that is the topic of line calling, specifically poor line calling, more specifically, what we refer to as cheating in junior tennis. And Coach JY has a new approach that he wanted to share with all of us this week. And I think you're going to find his approach to be much more palatable, maybe, than some of the other things that we've discussed previously in teaching our juniors how to deal with this adversity on the court, which, as we all know, tennis is a microcosm for life, so all of us have to face adversity, and best to go into it well armed and have an arsenal of tools available to us, ready to pull out when we need them. That said, I want to just remind you all about our upcoming trip to Barcelona and Mallorca in July of 2025. If you haven't seen the information on this trip, please go to our website, parentingaces.com, and take a look. It's right at the top of the homepage. We are pulling together a group of juniors and their parents, if they'd like to join in, to take an amazing journey to Barcelona, where the kids will be training and competing at a local academy in Barcelona, while the parents are free to go exploring and sightseeing. And then we'll head down to the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca for a week of training there, which the parents can participate in or not, but the kids will be integrated with the academy players, the full-time players, living in the dorms, training fitness, training on court, eating their meals with their peers there. It is going to be an amazing, amazing adventure, and I invite you all to take a look and sign up and come join us next July 18 to 27. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Coach J.Y. Aubone. So JY, welcome back. I cannot wait to hear about your experience at the Open with Riley, but really I want to cut straight to the chase and get into the meat of today's conversation, which is dealing with questionable line calls. I hate to use the cheating word, but we're going to have to use that word because that's the common vernacular, but cannot wait to jump into this conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and I'm so glad that you actually phrased it that way because, with the blog that's coming out, anyone who's going to read it they're gonna see I did it the same way. I'm very afraid to use the word cheating, and I'll admit right now I used it only in the title for complete clickbait because I know people are going to want to click on that. But in the art,
Same.
but in the blog, like I don't write it like that because that's not fair to kids. I've seen a lot of kids. I wrote it. There's another line I wrote in there, which is I've seen, I think 99% of kids in junior tennis are not cheaters, but 100% make bad line calls, just not on purpose. They just make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think parents they need to separate that difference. And I think it's very important also how they communicate that to their kids, because their kids are going to take that on themselves, and then that's where things grow, and that's where I think we really need to be careful when talking about this stuff.
I agree 100%. And I've talked about this before, but when my son first started playing tournaments, his very first tournament, he played a kid where even the kid's dad was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe these line calls. They're so bad that my kid's making. And my kid's coach at the time gave him what I now know was horrible advice, which was when somebody makes a bad line call, you just retaliate and you make a bad line call the next point. And instead of addressing it as people make mistakes, this stuff happens, it's how you respond that defines you and your character, and all the things that you wrote about in your blog, which I had the honor of pre-reading before this conversation. But I really want to delve into that and the fact that we know the human eye is not nearly as accurate as the electronic line calling tools that are now becoming more and more available in junior tennis and adult tennis, people make mistakes. And if you're seated to the side of the court or behind the court, you're going to see a ball very differently. And one or both may be correct, neither may be correct, so we need to have a little more grace out there.
Yeah, and I think we need to approach it from that perspective first, in the perspective of these are kids, right? I mean, these kids, very important that at the end of the day, I think two things are important to keep in mind. One, that these kids are playing tennis because they love it and they're happy competing. So essentially, they're trying to be happy, right? They're trying to make
Yeah.
the most out of their day, their time, feel good, have great memories. That's what they're trying to do. They're just trying to be happy. At the same time, kids are a product of the environment they grow up in. Now, their environment is influenced by so many things. So I'm not saying it's just by the household. I mean, it could be their friends, their practice partners, their coaches. There's so many things that go into it that can influence their pressure, the whatever pressure they feel to win. To then in that one moment in time where they're scared, nervous, angry, and they're 12 years old, and they tell their eye what they want to see as opposed to what actually happened. They're so emotional in the moment, they can't process anything. And I've been there with kids where even after a match, like right after a match, they're so emotional they can't talk. You can't get them to listen. They're all over the place, right? And these are the kids that we're gonna label as like cheaters or something. Like, my God, they're just trying to be happy. They probably also like would swear on their entire life at times that no, the ball really was out because they actually didn't really see it. They just really wanted it to be out. But we don't approach it in that form. It's either the call is correct or they cheated. That's it. It doesn't matter. There's no conversation about it. And I think that's just such a big mistake. Tennis, I'd love for a parent to sit on a court standing, not even a chair, right? A chair is already a little better, but even alone to call an entire court on a chair is hard. But just standing, call an entire court. Every line call it. It is not easy, and especially the far sides, and especially as you get to 16s and 18s, when they hit hard and fast, it's very, very difficult. And to crush somebody and label them a cheater because 2 or 3 millimeters, 4, that's so tiny, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, I mean, it's we got to be careful with how we handle this.
For sure. And let's be clear, there are some kids that are feeling that extreme pressure to win, whether it's coming from a coach or coming from a parent or just coming internally, right? That they are willing to do anything to get the point. There are a handful, but that's not the majority. And the majority are just making mistakes out there. Like you said, their brain is telling them that that ball was out, and so they call it out, and the opponent may see it a different way. And yeah, it's a tough situation to be in, especially for the younger kids. But as they get older and the pressure mounts as college becomes part of the equation and getting recruited and all of this, or getting wild cards into big events becomes part of the equation. Sometimes the emotion takes over, and it's really unfortunate that kids get stuck with these labels. And I can tell you, from my own kids' junior tennis years, there were the kids that you saw their name in the draw and you're like, oh, please God, don't make me have to play them, or my son would go to the tournament director at the beginning of the tournament and say, okay, if I get to this round and I have to play this kid, I need an official on court the whole time. I mean, but that's so sad.
Yeah, and let's address those that, let's just say they're cheating on purpose, right? Which again are such a small minority that are purposely doing it. So let's talk about them. It would be very important whenever we see a kid like that, rather than seeing a cheater, sitting back and thinking, what would make them want to do that? What would make them want to feel that way? Remember, we're a product of the environment. we grow up in. So if we're around good energy, good people, we know it's okay to win or lose, just have fun, all that stuff. We're going to play that way. We're going to compete that way. But when we're in an environment that's very stressful, very pressured, we're dealing with a lot of negative emotions inside of us, we're willing to go to any length to try to find that happiness, right? So we need to look at those kids and be like, hey, what's going on behind closed doors? What are they feeling inside that's making them feel like this is okay? And whether it's not to say that we're actually going to pull them aside and sit down and be like, hey, how are you doing? Like, you want to talk about something? No, it's not what I'm saying. But every single person, I've realized this a lot more as I've gotten older, which every single person that is acting out in some form or breaking rules, especially with kids, where they're just, what's the word that we say, lashing out, and all this, there's something inside going on. There's something deeply bothering them that they haven't been able to figure out or solve, and they feel like they have no way out. And once I've kind of learned that it's not that these kids were legit cheaters from day one, that it's more that something came in their environment that changed their perspective on everything. I thought, if those kids didn't encounter that and just encounter something else, they would never be like this. And so then that's when I started to look at this and be like, we have to be very careful labeling this, because these are actually kids that need help. These are kids that need a psychologist. They something is going on in their life that, okay, maybe they get through that tennis match. Maybe they win that tournament. Somewhere down the line in that kid's future, if those issues are not solved, they're going to go down a path that is actually to a very dark place. And so we need to be careful with just simply labeling them as cheaters and trying to actually, befriend them in some way, get to know them, see how you can support them. Don't just go around spreading rumors, because then you're putting them down even more. And then it's just going to, pile on top of that kid and pile on top of their negative emotions that they already have. So, I think we have to look at those situations in that form. And once we do that, and this is something I read about in the blog, is then when you see kids that way, you approach it differently and you feel it differently. And that's really all I want to do is, we can't change the call. You can't change the match. You can't change anything, right? Once the kid calls it out, there's no overruling it. Like, the ball could have been 20 feet inside the court. No ref. He's not going to come on the court and overrule something he didn't see. So from that point moving forward, everything about you as a player and trying to handle that becomes, how do I handle that? I can't get that point back. It's over. So then what are the things that I can think about? How can I approach the situation in a healthier mindset to try to then play the next point, the next game in as calm a place as possible? Because that's when we play our best, calm and confident, not upset, angry, screaming, cheating, ref, and all that stuff. That's when we play our worst. So how do we get to that place? And I think approaching things like that, like, all right, this kid just made a bad call, bad mistake, right? Whether it's cheating, whether they did it on purpose or not, it actually doesn't matter, right? In the moment, you're not getting the call back whether it was a mistake or cheating, but our perspective on it will now affect how we play the next point. So we can walk away and say, ooh, geez, that kid's all right, either he made a bad mistake or this kid is doing it on purpose, which poor kid, he's probably suffering on that other side of the court. Like, all right, I'm going to go get a ref. Because I always say that, go get a ref no matter what, right? It brings some peace to the court, but that ref's going to leave at some point anyway. So we still have to be able to handle it with or without the ref. And, if we can just see like, hey, geez, poor kid, my opponent's just willing to go to that length. It must be struggling. Pressure must be terrible. All right, I'll go get the ref. And then that just kind of makes things a little bit better for me, trying to see it as a mistake, as well, he made a mistake. I wonder why he called that ball out. I wonder what he was looking at. Again, you're not getting the call back anyway, but you're going to feel better about it if you saw a mistake than if you felt like you got cheated. And that's a lot of what I'm trying to talk about now with kids and with parents. It's like the way we approach it is just so important. Whether it was cheating or not, our perspective on how we handle it is way bigger than trying to get rid of the cheaters. Everyone's like, oh, we got to get rid of them. They got to suspend them. Oh, they should have a ref on the court the whole. That's not the answer. That's not the answer. That's a very short-term answer, which again isn't getting to the point where you're helping that kid anyway. It's more of how do we affect things, because also then later down the road, there's going to be a place where these kids are not playing tennis anymore. They're out in the real world, and their ability to handle situations and to approach things from a healthier perspective is extremely important. So learn that at a young age at tennis is also very useful.
So let's dig into that. Let's say you're in the midst of a match and your opponent makes a bad call, whether purposefully or on accident. What are the steps that you want your player to go through in response to the bad call?
So number one is it just my opponent made a mistake. I think the ball was in, they called it out. That's the first thing you have to not, oh my God, did they just cheat? Oh, I just got cheated. What do I do? I can't believe it. I can't, no. Just, hey, opponent made a mistake. All right, so what do you do now? Go get a ref. But calmly, no screaming, no yelling, no nothing. Because one, how are you 100% sure that ball was in? I've seen it. One of the biggest things I do is record matches and analyze them. And there'll be a lot of times we actually go back and we go to the right point in time and we can see the player I was working with throw their arms up. And I'm like, dude, that ball was out, clearly. And you just lost the next 2 games because you swore that the ball was in. You're the one that made the mistake, but you made such a huge deal out of it over nothing. So one, how sure are you that they made a mistake? Then after that is,
let me back up 1 second. So you say first thing is to go get a ref. How do you want the player to handle that with the opponent? Do they say something? Do they just walk off the court and go get the ref? Walk us through the steps.
Yeah, so you don't really have to say too much to your opponent because it doesn't matter. But I think in a calm way, say, hey, just gonna go get a ref. That's it. And if they say, well, why? That ball was out. Like, what do you think? You don't have to respond to them. Just be like, I just want him to oversee the calls. Just make sure that we don't make any mistakes or anything. Don't attack your opponent. Don't say because I think you cheated or because my ball was in, but you called it out. So this is ridiculous. None of that, because all you're doing is escalating the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So just calmly go get a ref. Tell him you're getting a ref. If he asks why, because I want them to oversee the calls. If they follow back with anything, just don't respond. Just go get the ref. That's it. So that's right. And then just bring the ref on the court, explain the situation. But look, I think they made a mistake. Again, very important the way you communicate it to the ref, because also the less drama refs have to deal with, the more helpful they're actually going to be. When they come in and kids are screaming, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I got it again." This is just they don't want to deal with it. They'll do it. That's the job they signed up for. But really, they want to be involved and help in a nice match between 2 players. So if you just go up, you tell them, "Look, he called the ball out or she called the ball out. I saw the ball in. Do you mind just overseeing the match for a bit?" That's it. No, like, well, the ball was in. They called it out. It should be my point. Like, you're not going to get the point. So you might as well be calm about it. And again, this is very important. Every psychologist will say it, like the words we use to communicate are extremely important. So saying they called it in or they called it out, I think it was in, I think it was a mistake. Can you please just oversee it so we don't make any more mistakes? That is a very important way. You're talking in a calm manner in healthy words. You're going to calm yourself down at the same time if you're able to talk to her. If you can't talk that way, you're not in a calm place.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So the ref comes, they stay for a game, which is kind of typical. They'll stay for a handful of points.
Yeah.
The ref leaves and another mistake is made by the opponent. Now what?
Oh, you can't get that call back anyway. Go get the ref. Same thing. Doesn't change. Now, I imagine where this conversation might go is, well, what if they do it again? Ref comes back for a game. And it's just back and forth. Same thing. They come for a game, nothing happens. Ref leaves. They do the same call again. That's happened before. We know that's happened before. So, at that point, again, very few matches will actually get to that point. I think we fear that more than it actually gets that bad. So, a couple of things. First, important to think of this. Why are we needing these points so badly in the first place, right? So, you're not getting cheated 40 times a match. No one's ever done that, okay? Then, like, you can say 10, but no one's ever cheated 40 times. So first, let's not put our focus in And again, it's important for us on how we coach ourselves through this. So you have to get to this point as a player. And parents, you got to help talk to your child about this as well. We should say the coach should be talking about it, but coaches aren't there. We've done that on other podcasts, whatever. So, the player has to think like, all right, why am I a deuce in the first place where I need this point so bad? Why am I down a set? Why is it 4-all in the first place? And I'm so desperate, to win a point. Okay. Again, you probably haven't been cheated 40 times, but you might be at a place where you've made 40 unforced errors or 40 bad strategic decisions. So if you can find a way to just put your thoughts into the things that are actually affecting you the most, not just the biggest emotionally because of the moment, but if you can focus on the 3 unforced errors that got you down 30-40 in the first place, and you can correct that, you might run away with the match and not worry if they cheat you because you're up 40-15 anyway, right? That's the one thing I've always found in matches where, like, I never cared that I got cheated when I was up 5-1. And look at the words I'm using. I still have that junior mentality, still using the word cheating. So even as coaches, we have to be careful on how we speak. So yeah, it never bothered me when I was winning big because I was up too big in the score line that it didn't matter. So it only mattered when I was like really close in a match. So again, why are you in that score in the first place? Think about the most important things.
And
The other thing,
this is, sorry to interrupt you, but it's that whole thing, control the controllables, right? You cannot control how your opponent is calling the ball. What you can control is how close to the lines you're hitting, whether you're making the unforced errors, whether you're making the right shot selection. I mean, all these things are within your control as a player. What your opponent is doing on the other side of the net is 100% outside your control.
Right. Yeah. And you can hit the next ball in the center of the court, hit it perfectly, and they might call it out. And there's nothing you can do about it except now, how do you handle it yourself, right? Which is everything that we're talking about. How do you handle it as a person? So if you're doing all these things and things still aren't helping, right? So you're focused on the right things. You've gotten a ref calmly. You have the best perspective that, like, wow, my opponent is just really struggling internally with this pressure, and it's still happening. We have 2 options left. And now is where things can start to get tricky, right? I would prefer to go to this first one and the second one we'll talk about. So the first part is have a nice little chat with your opponent on the sideline. And again, in a calm manner, be careful with the words you say. Just be, hey, I think you're making a lot of mistakes, but that's okay, man. I forgive you. No, this is just a tennis match. I know we're trying our hardest, but I forgive you. I'll still pull this match out anyway, but I forgive you. If you are encountering that 1% of players that are truly trying to make bad line calls on purpose, take those bathroom breaks at inopportune times to mess you up and do that stuff on purpose, they're looking to get you upset. They're looking to beat you by you losing your mind. Okay. And then your game just falls apart. They're not trying to beat you straight up tennis. If you can talk to them in a nice, calm manner and after you say, hey, I forgive you. I think you're deep down. I know you're a good person. I know that you'll be okay. Whatever pressures you're feeling, I'm sorry. Really feel bad for you. They're going to be so caught off guard. It's just going to completely throw them off. They're going to say, I can't rattle this player. But you might actually rattle them back.
There's a caveat to that though, JY. And I've seen kids say the words, but say it with a sarcastic tone of voice or with a sarcastic look on their face. That's not what we're talking about here. This has to be coming from the heart. It has to be a genuine, like, you have to believe what you're saying to your opponent. You can't say it in a snarky, you're dealing with a lot of stuff. I'm so sorry, right?
Yeah, because you might actually just encourage like even more behavior like that, because now they're going to get defensive because you're attacking them in a formal way. They're going to hear your tone. But, I think it starts this way. I think anytime we start trying to do something new in our lives, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel different. So the first time a player is going to try this, especially a young teenager, they're probably not going to want to say it. They're probably not going to feel bad for their opponent. That's just the truth, right? So again, we're talking about handling the 1% of situations. So it's like, probably not going to have to do this very much in your life. You'll probably be just fine on handling things properly, getting a referee. You focus on your unforced errors and whatever, and you're probably going to get through that match. You'll be okay. But you've made it to this one crazy moment in your life. The first time you want to say it, like you're actually, Djokovic has even said this when it comes to acting calm in very tense moments. Sometimes you have to fake it until you believe it.
Right.
So you have to say it knowing it's the right thing to say at that right time. And when you do it the second and third time, if you can continuously do that, that means you yourself are probably getting to a healthy place in your mind where you can reach back and actually think like that. You'll actually be able to start to see things from a healthier perspective. But if you don't even do it that first time and you're just waiting for that one moment to actually believe and feel bad for them and say you actually forgive them, I think it's going to be really hard. So I think it's just something, just like anything new. You know what you got to do. You don't really want to do it, but you do it anyway. And then you kind of see how that day plays out and you're like, hey, that wasn't so bad. I think I can do that again. So
how important is it to practice these approaches outside of a tournament match? So playing a practice match and, having as the coach, maybe you tell one of the players, okay, I want you to really try and rattle your opponent today.
oh yeah. Best example, personal example, and it worked, and I hated that it worked. So freshman at Florida State, first year, I think we were on the road going to play our first match. Then we were playing Notre Dame and then Ohio State. I'm a freshman. We started all our matches at home, so favorable crowd and everything. One day at practice in Tallahassee, good old Dwayne and Nick Kroll come up with a brilliant idea. I guess they've done this before. To bring out some people to heckle me in practice. And they put me up against one of the best players on the team. It happened to be one of the days I just didn't get a lot of sleep. It was the perfect time for them to do something like that. I snapped at these people, and Dwayne had to come over I lost the first set like 6-0. It was a disaster of a practice. And I got so mad at Dwayne. He had to explain that, no, they're there on purpose. Like, I asked them to come out. Like, they're actually big supporters of the team. Like, they're just trying to help because we're trying to get you ready for what's coming up. Mm-hmm. And I was so, obviously in the moment, I'm like, I don't care. That's a stupid idea. But it was a brilliant idea. Yeah. Because it showed exactly how prepared I was to actually handle something like that. And only then could I finally sit down and be like, when things calm down, they're like, hey, all right, I got to be ready to handle that better. So I do believe, set up a practice match and the coach tells one player, hey, you get something, make it an egregious call in a big moment. Like, I'll back you up. I'll say, I don't know, didn't see it, too good. And then that way they get to practice all this stuff. I think you have to practice it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Moving on, you said there were two things that you wanted.
Yeah. The final one, which you kind of hit on in the first place, which is making the bad line calls back on purpose to get them back, which I will never coach that. I will never say, I want you to do that. If that happens to you, I want you to do that. I will say I understand it. I can understand the perspective of it to try to stand up for yourself and be like, the refs are not helping. I'm out here on my own. No coaches, no nothing. Fight for survival. I got to stand up for myself. This is getting out of hand. I understand that perspective. I've seen it. Here's the big issue with it. What if it doesn't work? Right? What if the calls don't stop? What if they actually just get worse? Because maybe they actually believe that the calls that maybe your opponent believed, the calls that they were making actually were correct. Mm-hmm. And maybe they weren't. Maybe you were getting upset at just calls that are very, very close, very hard to see. So now your opponent, really, it's obvious that you got them back because you did it on purpose in an obvious situation. Now they feel compelled to do the same. And now this match just became an embarrassment, a disaster, because it's just back and forth, right? Yeah. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? So that's problem number one. Problem number two, and which is the biggest one, is that I don't think most kids are able to handle the repercussions of doing that, which is the second you do that, what you just did. Deep down in your heart, in your soul, again, 99% of kids are good kids out there. 100% of good kids are there. But most kids, even when they do this, they're just doing it to get it back. They know making bad line calls on purpose is the wrong thing to do. The second they do it, they know that if anyone was watching, they're going to call them a cheater right now.
Yeah.
And they know that the whole tournament is now going to find out that they cheated. And they can't handle that because deep down, that's not who they are. They're good kids. They're just trying to figure out a way through the situation. And they actually make that call and they play worse.
Yeah.
And it ruins their experience because now they're playing the rest of the match with this complete guilt, because they know deep down that while some people are able to make those bad line calls back on purpose and it's worked for them, they just can't live with it. They can't live with somebody labeling them a cheater. And so now, not only like are you going to lose the match, you're ruining your experience, but the whole tournament's going to start to think you're a cheater. And unless you're willing to handle that and just stand up to them and be like, no, I don't care what people think. I know what I was doing. I was in the right. Most kids can't do that.
Right.
And most parents actually like struggle to hear that their kids are cheaters as well. So they can't tolerate it either. They can tolerate the concept until it's time to do it. And then it's like, just like a lot of things like, whoa, like, I don't know, like this doesn't feel right. So that's why I'll never coach it. I can understand it. It's just, I'll never, because I just don't think kids can handle it.
Right. I have heard kids that feel like there are a lot of mistakes being made on the other side of the court, have a little conversation with the opponent at the net or a side change and say, hey, it looks like you're playing under a different set of rules today than I'm used to playing under. So let's agree which set of rules we're going to play today. And whatever we agree on, we're both going to abide by that. I've heard that approach. What do you think of that?
I think that falls into a more respectful manner of doing bad line calls back on purpose. I like the start of it, and that would probably stop things for a little while. So I would prefer a player do that first before directly going into bad line calls, because basically then what it says is you're giving them that's a warning, right? You're giving them, you do this one more time, I'm going to let everything go. You do it one more time. You just gave me the green light to do the same to you. But again, it just goes back to the same thing. How sure are you of the calls being made? We know kids don't see balls very well for many reasons. Their eyes are also still being trained, and the game goes fast. I've seen pros in practice, U.S. Open, we're at practice. I looked at the other side of the net, looked at Ryan, I'm like, kind of think your ball's in. And we're like, oh well. So it's just hard. The game gets hard to see sometimes when it goes really, really fast.
Yeah. Well, so that kind of is a good segue into the importance of implementing things like swing vision at tournaments to do electronic line calling. But we know that's not coming fast. It's being rolled out very slowly. It comes at a cost and all this. I have been to now 2 tournaments where swing vision's being used just for challenges. It's not automatically calling the lines like we see at the US Open, but if a player thinks a ball was called incorrectly, they can challenge it, go to the side, check it out on the iPad, and actually see where the ball landed. It's a great tool, but again, it's expensive. We know not every section is going to be able to afford it. Not every tournament's going to be able to afford it. I don't know. This has been going on for so long that I feel like we've got to change our mindset around this. And I love that the focus of your blog article is changing our language, changing the way we talk about it, that it's a mistake, it's not cheating, that, we saw it one way, our opponent saw it a different way. One of us may be right, but we both may be wrong. Like you said, the game gets so fast, especially as the kids get bigger and stronger, that mistakes are inevitable. They just are.
Yeah, I take the same approach, the same mindset with everything, but if people have read like my UTR blog and everything, right? To me, it's everything to me is about what can we control? I see a few too many people looking for somebody else or something else to solve their problems, right? Oh, the UTR is a terrible rating. This is why my child isn't getting better. No, that's not true. Okay. Oh, my child gets cheated. This is so terrible. I'm going to pull him out. This is a miserable experience. And I think back and I'm like, why did I never feel that cheating or ranking or rating held me back? Why is it that if you asked every single collegiate player or pro player that they'll never say a ranking, rating, or line calls held them back? Now, did they lose a match or two for it? Yes, but your career will never be held back unless you choose to allow it to be held back by focusing on the wrong things. If you simply just take a look, if I become a better player, make less unforced errors, control balls to better spots in the court, become more consistent, become a more focused and disciplined player, have a better mindset throughout matches that can handle tough situations, I will overcome this because there are people doing this. There are people overcoming the same things that other people are overcoming. Why are they able to do it and you're not? So that's where I put my focus in as a coach. And if you look at everything that these successful players do, they focus so much on just themselves. Yes, they get bothered when a bad line call happens, but they just get back to work. They don't say, USTA, you need to implement line calling. USTA, you got to kick these people out. This is horrible. Oh my God, we need refs on every court. I understand those solutions. A lot of these things will be very helpful, but one, they'll never be perfect, and they're not going to happen by the time your child graduates and goes on to college. So, and the other point too is even within it, you can put a ref on every court. We're not going to have electronic line calling like they do at pro events. Way too expensive. Never going to happen. Every other sport has problems with referees. They all have complaints. Everyone's complaining anyway. You can go to any sport you want. Somebody's going to complain about some call somewhere and some sportsmanship. It doesn't end. So don't put your focus on other people solving your thing. What can we do? And that's where I address it with my blog. I think there's a lot that we can do better, especially the one we haven't talked about yet, parents. Parents, the way they talk to their kids about these situations is so important. If parents are saying, oh, you were cheated this and you were cheated that, and all these kids are cheaters, well, what's the child going to think? They're just going to listen to their parents. So they're going to think the same thing. But if you're taking part in a sport where you feel like everything is being cheated this, cheated that, how enjoyable is that experience? So first, you're going to ruin their enjoyment of the sport. They're probably not going to want to play it. Every time they start losing, they're just going to blame it on line calls. They're never going to focus on themselves to get better. So that's already, they're down a bad path, right? And then the other part too is, parents have this incredible opportunity to remind these kids, because kids will walk off the court and say, oh my God, I got cheated and all this. And of course, the coach should be there. They're not. So now it's the parent that has to talk to them, and they can say, hey, look, no, we don't know if you got cheated. Maybe they made a mistake. Maybe they didn't. Why did you actually lose the match? Put your focus there. All these things that we're talking about, the parent needs to reinforce. Because if we say all this stuff, but the parent comes back and they're talking about cheating this and cheating that and this player this and sportsmanship that, I hear it every weekend. I hear something like, oh, they went to the bathroom on purpose. Like, oh, they're slowing down. Kids aren't this smart, all right? There's no way every tournament these kids are filled with the smartest kids in the world, because they'd be playing junior grand slams already. So they don't, things just happen, all right? So, but they talk about this in front of their kids.
Yeah.
So they might not be saying it directly to their kids, but they'll talk about it in front of their kids loudly. They'll talk about it with other parents. Other kids hear it, and kids listen to their parents. A kid, I'll say this. There's a lot of situations where I can say one thing and the parent can say something. And even though they're two different things, the kid a lot of times will listen to the parent because it's the parent. And they will, that's from birth, right? Mom or dad, I'll go with you, forever. This is just a coach. So the parent can convince the player the coach is wrong. It is harder for me to convince the player that the parent is wrong, at times. So parents are so important in this. So they have to speak in the same language. Talk about kids making mistakes. Help your child understand the pressures other kids might be dealing with, and that might be influencing their calls. Help them understand, that anytime you see a kid acting out, you see a kid bullying, you see a kid screaming, throwing their racket, bad sportsmanship, don't say that kid has a bad attitude and has a terrible behavior and is a horrible person and all this. You say that in front of your kid's going to believe that then. But if you start talking to your kid from a young age, no, hey, that kid's struggling. maybe we don't know what it is. We're not going to sit here and judge that kid, but we know either at home or back at practice, or there's something going on in his life, and especially with players as they get older and they're pros, personal relationships with boyfriends or girlfriends, that can impact them. We don't know, but there is something. So I think it's important for parents to help your kids understand, why did their opponents act that way? Look, we don't condone it. We don't think it's great. We're really, really sorry you had to go through that. It's an awful experience, but that kid's struggling. So just, I know it's not going to make you feel better, but just understand what's going on. You talk to them like that, you're going to change their entire world and perspective on how they view all this. And they're going to be able to get it a lot faster, and they're going to enjoy it a lot more because they know it's bigger than just line call.
Well, and this is a basic human response, right? Like, we can either judge people or we can show empathy and grace toward them. And one way leads down a path of frustration and anger and throwing your hands up, and the other leads to a path of having a nice life and being able to go out and find joy in things. And that should be the goal, in my opinion. I'm not going to tell everybody how to parent and how to live their life, but I know I'm a lot happier when I can step back from judgment and just give grace. And I know I keep using that word, and I'm not using it in a faith-based way. It's more just a way of interacting with fellow humans, right? Give people the benefit of the doubt. Understand that you don't know everything that they're experiencing. You have no way of knowing. So give them the benefit of the doubt, do your thing, stay in your lane, control the controllables, and the other stuff will take care of itself eventually.
What you said it in a way that I have goosebumps right now, because it's just so important and so awesome what you said. The human element. Parents unintentionally, this is completely unintentional, they dehumanize other kids when it's at the expense of their kid losing a match or crying, having a bad day. I have a son now, and whenever I see him crying or anything, it's an awful feeling. So it's I can understand, but these are still human beings. These are kids. And tennis to me has always been an extension of the education system and preparing them for life after tennis. Every single kid is going to be done with tennis at some point. They need to have life skills, not just to be able to maintain relationships, but to be able to have a good experience at work. And so that skill of just understanding, why is the person in front of me screaming, yelling, having a bad day, being aggressive towards me? If to learn that skill at a young age, because once you see that and you're encountering a tough moment with somebody, and you can get to the place where, instead of it being all about you and protecting yourself and being like, whoa, like something's really struggling with this person. When you actually put yourself in their shoes and try to think about what's going on with them, and you actually take a second and be like, hey, hold on a second. I've seen this at work so many times, where someone's having a bad day. I'm like, hey, I know I can't respond. I know they're struggling so bad that it doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter. I am not going to make the situation better. But then I come back to maybe the next day and be like, hey, man, how's everything at home? How's everything going on? Anything you want to talk about? And I find out why they were acting that way. And they didn't want to act that way. But most people, they don't have the courage to just sit there and admit they were wrong and apologize. But then when you go there and you show them empathy and say, hey, hey, I forgive you for what you did yesterday. I don't like what you did. It's okay. But like, what's going on with you? Like, and then you get them to open up. You can finally solve whatever issue you had the previous day in the first place. You now have a healthier relationship with that person. You're going to have a better work experience. Or if it even happened at home or with friends, you're going to have a better life outside, as well. But that skill can be taught right now with kids through our tennis tournaments on how to deal with these bad line calls. We have a great opportunity as coaches and parents to prepare these kids for the most difficult thing in life, which is how to deal with other people, right? So I love what you said. I'm looking at the human element behind all of this.
Okay, this is exhausting and emotional and all these things. I'm like having all these feelings right this minute and like flashing back to poor word choices on my part in my tennis parenting experience.
Oh, look,
So I'm really
I'll say
happy we're
this as you.
having this conversation.
I need to say this because, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but look, take this from a person who in a collegiate tennis match, I cheated back on purpose. Okay, I've been through every situation that every parent is trying to protect your child from. You cannot protect them. They're going. So I've been in this situation where I've tried to get a ref calmly. I've tried to get a ref, screaming and yelling at my opponent. I've tried to have that conversation calm. I've tried every little thing I've talked about here. The worst things were when I was screaming and yelling, screaming at my opponent, screaming at the ref, and I cheated back on purpose. I did that. I know what that feels like. I went back into my ethics class in sport management and told them, like, I cheated on purpose. I did it. I was so guilty. Like, so I've been through all this. So please, like, take it from advice from people who have gone through this, and we've made all these mistakes. That's why we know what not to do. So, because we're trying to, rather than you go through the experience of learning what not to do with your own poor choices, right? We're trying to give you a shortcut. So don't
Yeah.
try that stuff. Just move on to the good stuff.
Yeah, love it. Well, that's a good segue, JY, into this new journal that you've created. And I want to just take the last few minutes and chat about that for a minute. The importance of journaling and why you felt the need to create an actual physical product to help our players.
Yeah, I mean, I've been wanting to do this for so long. I'm so happy I actually got it done because it's been on my to-do list for 3 years, like on my phone. It's so funny that, look, we know most of these kids go to tournaments without coaches. So they get to tournaments, they want to do their best, they have the best of intentions. But in this game, there's so many things we could potentially focus on, and we can talk about it all we want, but the power of writing something down, it ingrains things in your memory that is better than anything you can just talk about. So trying to help kids get their mind organized on what they should be focused on for a match so that they can have the ability to coach themselves through a match is where all of this started. I'm like, these kids need to we can't solve the situation of getting every kid's coach at every tournament. Like, I just don't, just like the line call, it's not happening anytime soon. So what tool can I give these players to be able to prepare for matches better, in a healthier fashion, a more organized fashion. And then also in the middle of the match, they have this little assistant coach, this little book where they can revisit their goals. Because I think that's so important. Tennis is an emotional sport. Kids are by themselves in the middle of a match. So how many times have we seen it with kids? Like, once they hit that breaking point of emotion, they can't think, they forget everything.
Yeah.
So what can we do to recenter their minds? Open the journal. What am I supposed to be working on? Get back to it. Read it every changeover. What are my goals for today? Because that's all we're just trying to do in a match is get back, recenter. We're all going to lose our focus, but we just don't want to lose it for too long. And that's where I really want to do this book or the journal. So I created that journal so they can revisit. There's a pre-match page and a post-match page where they, hey, how did you do within the 3 goals? Or these things that you wanted to work on? What did your opponent do well? But my favorite part as well is that there's a little section for their coach's thoughts to be filled out. So, and there's, I did it on purpose for a few reasons. One, kids will say one thing about a match, and then if the coach watched it, there's some differentiating things, right?
Right.
I want that kid to write what that coach down because they might be hearing it, but they're not really paying attention to it.
Yeah.
So they still walk away with their own thoughts from the match. When they have to write down, again, you remember it better anytime you write something down. Then that match becomes different in their mind for the future. The other thing too within that is if you have too many pages and your coach never filled something out, or you didn't fill out where your coach said, that means coaches aren't watching your matches. That's an area you need to get improved. So that's a subtle sign that there's something you can improve in your process right there if you never are filling out the coach's thoughts page, section. And then the final thing too is I think it's what differentiates the journal is all the coaching tips inside of it, which I'm going to look to grow even more. But a lot of times, especially kids, they're encountering new opponents, different strategies, different ways, different weather conditions. How do you handle that? So you can open the book and be like, wow, 25-mile-an-hour winds. How do I play in this? There's a section for that. How do I play against a big server? I just turned 12 years old, but I'm playing a guy who's 6'2" for the first time. How do I handle this? There's a section on how to play against big servers. So there's coaching tips in the middle of the book. So you have legal coaching in the middle of a junior tennis match that can help you get through some situations. There's also a recommended reading page, books that I think kids can read, simple reads that can really help them become a better athlete, better performer, and some great quotes from some great coaches that, they all talk along similar lines, but it's really cool to see how other people think.
Love it. And if people are interested in ordering a copy of the journal, they can do that through your website?
Through my website, which takes them directly to Amazon right now. Everything's on Amazon, so you can either go to Amazon and just search Aubone Tennis Match Journal. You can go to my website, click on the shop now, it takes you there. And if this is brand new, so if Parenting Aces members can hold off a few weeks, they might get a special discount from me. I just waiting to get some things in order first. Learning the book publishing side of things has been a new experience for me in the last few months. So I'm working around that so I can, help get some discounts for people.
And we'll have a link to the journal, to your website in the show notes on parentingaces.com or wherever you're consuming this podcast. So take a look at those notes for the links. And I think I've got an advanced look at the journal. It is amazing. And I'm excited to get it into the hands of all of our juniors. So JY, thanks for taking the time to put that together and sharing it with me, and for coming on and talking about not just quote cheating in junior tennis, but really this is more about how do we respond when we feel like we've been cheated. That's really the crux of this conversation, and I hope that's the takeaway. Is we talk about control the controllables. This is one of those controllables, and our kids need to learn how to manage this in a more efficient and more productive way that is going to bleed over into life outside the tennis court, which is what we all want.
I couldn't have finished that any better myself. So, thank you for having me on one more time. I always love talking about tennis with you. And hopefully get to see you sometime soon again.
That'd be awesome. JY, thanks so much. And to my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces.